Chamber of Commerce. She was able to hear me speak earlier this year at a WCCE conference, and she had the opportunity, when she had the opportunity to bring me in to bring this kind of real world DEI approach to the group, she reached out to me. And so I really appreciate her. I appreciate the chamber and their sponsorship of me. I have a really bad case of imposter syndrome. And so if you don't know what that is, that's a great word to look up today. But I have a bad case of imposter syndrome. So anytime someone asks me to speak, I'm always questioning, is this going to be good enough? Is this going to be okay? And should I pass on this opportunity? And quite frankly, that imposter syndrome is built and it's in me because of the bias that I receive on, on a very frequent basis, and that come in the form of microaggressions. And we'll kind of touch on those a little bit later. But again, thank you so much, Monique, to your team and trusting me with this message today. As you know, I love the topic of implicit bias because it can be a very, very powerful tool to use to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in your workspace. And so just wanted to say that. And then thank you to everyone who has joined in on this presentation. I know you're going to hear a lot from this J.E.D.I series, and so I'm really excited to be a part of it. Next slide, please. So on the next slide, this is just going to be our agenda for today, just so you know kind of what we're going to be doing. I talked a little bit about why me. Oh, I think I skipped that one. Sorry, Jeremy, I'll have to have you go back. I'm so sorry. Talk a little bit about why me. And so as Monique said, she kind of went over this already. And sometimes I don't allow that to happen only because folks will then color who I am and what I'm saying based on the accomplishments that I've had. And so I try not to introduce myself that way because I want you to listen to what I'm saying as a trusted messenger versus, she's a certified diversity professional, because most of what we'll talk about today is through lived experience, not so much through my certification. How to apply it, though, comes from both my formal and informal education. So as she mentioned, I am the CEO for the Kent Chamber of Commerce. I happen to be the first Black woman or Black person to lead that chamber in its 70 plus years. And I'm very proud to do that. But I definitely want to make sure that if I have the opportunity, that I would bring in more people of color to lead chambers of commerce so that the person leading that business community matches the community in which they serve. I am also the lead facilitator and CEO for my consulting firm, Zenobia Harris LLC, where I believe trusted messaging and practical application is most important. And so whether I'm going into K through 12 and talking to the youth, or I'm talking to educators, even at Skagit Valley, I know I see some of my Skagit Valley people here today too, about implicit bias, I wanna make sure that I talk very practically about it. So what you won't see from me is a bunch of statistics and data and case studies. And the reason for that is because that data can be easily found. And if you trust me, you know that having a diverse community and working in a diverse workplace actually increases the bottom line in a positive way. And so there's no need for me to go over that information. There's plenty of data for you to go over that with. And so I am also, like I said, a serial entrepreneur. I have a real estate license. I'm a signing notary. I'm an author. I have my own business, and I work a full-time job at the chamber. I do have a master's degree in public administration, which helps me in the role that I'm in now. And the reason, and a lot of people ask me this, so I like to say the reason I don't have a business degree, a master's, is because I already have a bachelor's in business and I'm a serial entrepreneur. So I wanted to do something different. So I've kind of put myself and been successful because I put myself in positions where folks think I don't belong or shouldn't be. So we will now go to the next slide. Thank you very much. And then on this slide, again, just the agenda. So why me? right? You heard me kind of go over my accolades or my education, but that's not why I'm here today. I'm really here today because I've been in rooms and situations and tables where folks have the audacity to ask me why I'm at this location. How did you get here, Zenobia? Why are you here? Are you here? I've been in situations where I go into team meetings and instantly I'm mistaken for the house cleaner or the server, and or who do you work for? That's a question I get all the time. Well, who is the chamber CEO? Well, who are you working for? And so that is the reason why I'm here today, because I have been in places and been able to navigate those spaces successfully. And so I just like to give kind of my take and articulate what it really means when someone is biased and what it does to the other person. um, and I've also mastered the art of calling out, right? There's a very thin line, and I'll talk about this later, but there's a thin line between calling someone out and being an angry Black woman. And so I've actually, in my mind, I've mastered that. And so today we'll define implicit bias, the cause and effect of implicit bias. We'll also we'll do a bias exercise, and then I'll have 3 action items, 3 things that you can walk away with today and feel comfortable doing if you want to increase your DEI at your workplace. Next slide, please. So, in my former life, I was a teacher. And so I'm going to need the audience, the folks that are here today that are here to learn. The good thing about being able to speak on this topic is that I always learn something new from the audience. So, this is when I kind of pull you in to pull in information into the chat. So, I'm just asking this question to the folks out there. What is implicit bias? So, what do you think implicit bias is? And I'm a Gen Xer, so I value interaction and I value feedback. So hopefully you guys can put in the chat there. What do you think implicit bias is? Either I can't see the chat. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. I love honesty. I have no idea, but I'm ready to learn. Thank you. Expressing preferences for, dislikes for, automatic. Yes. Unconscious bias. Yes, I will use those interchangeably today. Implicit bias and unconscious bias. Awesome. Where you've grown up, you've lived, preferences, stereotypes, biases. Great. So thank you so much for that. You guys are all correct. All of those are either a bias or how you obtain a bias. And so again, I'm just going to say that sometimes I'll use implicit bias and sometimes I'll use unconscious bias. And after we go to the next slide, you'll know why it's okay to kind of use them interchangeably. So what is implicit bias? The definition is here on this next slide. And an implicit bias refers to the brain's automatic, instant association of stereotypes or attitudes toward particular groups without conscious awareness. And so I'll read that again because it's very important. As you can see on the slide, I've highlighted a couple of words that are also very important. They're automatic, they're instant, and they relate to stereotypes or attitudes towards a particular group. What's most important, though, is it is without our conscious awareness, right? And so that's the difference between a prejudice and a bias, is that this is unintentional. So, how do we develop bias? And I think some of you have kind of answered that already. If we go to the next slide, that's my first question for you that you're welcome to put into the chat. I see here the cultured, viewed, ingrained into stereotypes in the media, conversation around you. Awesome. When you develop bias, do you think your education matters in your bias? And again, this is your opportunity to use the chat. These are not our rhetorical questions. I am looking for someone to answer. Um, Thinking about also, does your bias, does your upbringing matter? Yes, thank you. Next slide. So the next question is your bias learned or are you born biased? This is that whole, nature versus nurture, learned in all caps, learned with exclamation, right? Learned. So not things that we are born with. Thank you. Learned and modeled by your parents, definitely learned. Thank you so much. Next slide. Do you know someone who is biased? I do. Anyone? Yes? Thank you, Julie. We all are biased. Yes, everyone. We all do. Yes, I love it. Okay, here's a harder question. Next slide. Have you told them that they are biased? Education can bias us individually. Yes, sometimes. Thank you. Sometimes. I love the sometimes. It takes a bold person to be able to do that. You have to be able to advocate and be willing to kind of go out on a limb. Awesome. When we're not in an argument about something, yes, very smart. You don't want to argue about it because the truth is that everyone has biases. My students say yes. That's good. You're a great instructor if you are calling folks out in front of your students. That's wonderful. Okay, last question. Are you biased? Yes. Awesome. Thank you for being honest. Thank you very much for being honest. I always laugh and I say, I am a certified diversity professional. I know exactly what not to do, but our biases honestly are ingrained in us for a very long time. And so it's very difficult to not be biased. And so once you're honest about that, then you can actually make change toward being more inclusive and more inviting in your environment. No, yes, Moni, we do not try to be biased. No one wants to be biased. And again, I'll go over this statement multiple times, but the difference between a bias and a prejudice is that one is conscious and one is unconscious. One is intentional and one is unintentional. Yes, we are all human, so we all have biases because we were brought up and have experienced different things. So if we go to the next slide, we have a very, I guess, what I call a bottled in definition of what how we gain our implicit bias. And the most fascinating, I guess, aspect of implicit bias for me is that they can be both positive and they can also be negative, right? So they can have a negative connotation or a positive connotation depending on what situation you're in, but they will lead you to unintentional stereotyping. I want to be very clear here that your company culture alone can also influence biases, which means that these biases can be influenced from internal factors and also external factors. And I'm talking inside of the workplace, in the workplace and outside of the workplace. So again, make no misunderstanding that a bias is intentional, or I'm sorry, when a bias is intentional, it is prejudice. So just make that note and be very aware. I also want to be very clear because I get this a lot when folks say, well, I don't know I'm biased. I don't mean any harm. And that is very true. But our biases actually keep us safe. And so just imagine, you're at the grocery store, it's late at night, you see a group of people, you have two options. You go right or you go left. On right side, you have a group of people kind of standing around. You're not really sure what they're doing. If you can get to where you need to be, I would take the road where there are no people there in the middle of the night because that's safe. Now, am I saying that those people are up to no good or they're going to be dangerous or they're going to hurt me? No, I'm taking the safe option. So just be sure and be very clear that using your bias to keep you safe or using your bias to protect you is not a negative thing. That actually is a positive thing. And it also can go on instinct, right? When people say, oh, my instinct tells me not to do this. We just need to be very careful that that instinct does not work when it is in the workplace, and it's when it's time for us to hire someone, or it's time for us to gather resources. We don't want to be biased when it comes to that. We have to look at this utilitarian decision and make sure that it's for the better good, right? The whole group, and not just, one person, meaning you. Um, we have these unconscious bias. I always like to say this. Every time I see a student driver, they have the sticker on the back and it says student driver. I instantly am like, I'm getting off the road with them. I don't want to be behind them. So I'll make a turn and get to where I need to be. When in fact, I've never had an encounter with the student driver. I've never seen a student driver jacked up on the side of the road. I've never seen them hit anyone. I actually don't even see them speeding. But in my mind, I think, oh, dangerous. Don't want to be around a student driver. So completely biased, but it probably keeps them safe and keeps me safe as well. So I'll read this definition for you. So implicit biases are influenced by experiences, although these, now that's just really small. Attitudes may not be a direct personal experience. Your media portrayals, your upbringing, all of these contribute to how you judge a group or a social group. And so what does that really mean? So we went over what is an implicit bias, and it's very simple. And this is another reason why I don't do data, because you don't need data to show, and you don't need a study to show what a bias is. It's very clear and it's very simple. It is an unconscious awareness of grouping people together, right? And then now that you know everyone has bias, now that you know you have bias, my job is to help you get past that and figure out, how do I recognize the bias? How do I limit my activity? So, how do I limit, let's say I stop watching news at a certain time because I know that the news has a certain portrayal of different people and I'd rather not do that, right? So, now that you know what it is, why you have it, and now we're going to talk about kind of how to curb it, right? So, on the next slide, I heard this. A speaker once, he was doing a TEDx, and he was trying to explain how something unconscious, like a bias, kind of goes into our daily life. And he used two people as an example. And I'll never forget this, because I thought, well, that's an easy way to think about it. Let's talk about a teacher. K through 12 teacher, elementary teacher. I believe that a teacher goes to work every day with the idea and the hope that some that day a light bulb is going to go off with one of their students. That's just what they're there for. They're there to make sure that the kids are able to connect the dots. They want to see kids be successful. They want to help them learn. They have to love children. And so it's just, I would say, top 5 hardest jobs in America is to be a teacher. I don't think that they're doing it for the money. They're doing it because they want to be there when that light bulb goes off, and they want to influence the next generation. Well, all of that can be true. And the same thing can be true for a teacher who leads their district in suspensions of kids of color or boys of color specifically, right? So at her core, his or her core, they want to help children, but somehow their bias creeps in, and now they have this stereotype that when a kid is misbehaving, that they are sending them to the office. The problem with that is they send more children of color than not. And so that's because their biases are there, right? So then let's take another profession that I would never do and have a lot of respect for, and that's a police officer. A police officer, I think, wakes up in the morning or night, whenever they go to work, and they really want to embody what is written on their car, which is to protect and to serve. I don't think anyone is running into danger because they want to create more danger. They're there to actually help people. But the same can be true for the police officer who goes there on a daily basis, puts on his uniform, goes in to save people, but also leads his district and his precinct in stop and frisk of African American people. Those two things can exist in the same person. And so once you realize that you can be at your core, have the most honest intentions, but then also on the other side, allow your biases to make these rapid decisions for you. This is how they live in, in one spot. So that's what that is. I have a video, and I'm not sure, Jeremy, if it's going to allow you to click on that. It should allow you to click on the slide here. Nope, go back. And, oh, nope. I guess I missed it. There was a cool video.
I think I saw it on the previous
It's on
slide.
page 11. Yeah. Yep, one more slide up. And it says, addressing unconscious bias, YouTube, other direction. Yep, there you go. One more. Perfect. So there where it says addressing unconscious bias. This is a really cool video, and it allows us to see something that we hear every day, but they do it in such a fantastic way that I think that you guys will enjoy it. So Jeremy, are you able to pull that up?
So, I heard you're about to have your Congratulations.
Yeah. It's a girl. We're thrilled. I'm a little nervous.
Don't be. You'll do great. Although the timing is a little unfortunate.
How so?
Well, we have a new job opening coming up, and I was thinking about recommending you, but I assume you'll want to switch to part-time as a new father. Okay, let's get started.
Bill, would you mind taking notes on the whiteboard? You have the loveliest handwriting.
Okay.
Good morning. I have a meeting with Erica Martinez. Oh, hey. Oh, it's great to see you again. I've been meaning to ask you to get in touch with my assistant to reschedule that meeting from last week. Oh, by the way, I'm so sorry. Are you Nadia or Danielle's assistant?
I'm your finance manager.
Okay, folks. Big meeting is coming up tomorrow. How do you want to handle it?
I definitely think Isabel should be a part of it since she did all the analysis.
I think Maria should be there as well. It'll be a great chance for her to see what these kinds of meetings are like.
Makes sense to me. But this is beginning to feel like a big group. Bill, why don't you sit this one out? And that way we'll feel like less of a crowd.
This seems really important. I'd hate to miss out on something that can have a big impact on what we're doing.
Listen, Bill, we're gonna need you to be more of a team player if you're gonna be successful here.
He did a surprisingly good job on the numbers for the board. It was pretty complicated and math heavy, but he seemed to get it right away.
Well, great. Sounds like some real potential there.
Yeah, but he needs to be more assertive, more forceful. Sometimes he can come off as too soft and nice.
You know, a few others have mentioned something along those lines. I think I'm going to bring it up with him.
I wouldn't do that. He can be a little emotional, and sometimes his feelings get the best of him.
I'll find a way to work it in.
Okay.
Wow. 3 men on one team. This is pretty rare.
Well, we're all just really passionate and excited about the topic.
Really? I just wouldn't have guessed you guys would be interested in working on our new perfume launch.
I thought this would be a great way to get more experience in product marketing.
Yeah, and a huge opportunity to do some really creative work.
Of course. You know, that's great. I'm glad you guys are here. Looking forward to the chit-chat about the football and the sports cars and the planning meetings. Yeah, keep up the good work.
Are you okay? You seem a little stressed lately. Everything okay at home?
Actually, everything's fine. Why do you ask?
Well, it's just you seem a little disheveled lately. Normally you're so well put together and stylish. The stress of the job starting to get to you?
Nope, just trying to stay on top of these presentation deadlines we got coming up.
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. That's a lot for you to handle on your own. If you want someone to take some of that workload off of you, Alicia works great under pressure.
Thanks for the offer. Got an email.
Hey, how you doing?
Excited about the party. Just feel bad about being so late, but I got stuck in traffic.
Oh, no worries. These office things, they never really start on time. So who are you here with?
Oh, my wife couldn't make it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just assumed that you were one of the spouses, you know?
I don't know, I work here. My wife doesn't.
Oh, that's nice.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for sharing that. So I like that video because many of those scenarios have happened to me, but when you hear it happen to a guy, most people are like, well, that's an odd.
She's a woman. Man's job. He's clearly not educated.
Does she even speak English?
Awesome. So clearly there's some sequence of videos there. But I say that to say, if you ever been in a room and those things have happened, I bet you've never heard that happen to a man. And so when you hear it from the other side, hopefully you can see or understand how silly it actually sounds. Oh, you had a baby, you need to work part-time. When it was the man, it was like, why would we think that, right? But it happens to women all of the time. I've been passed up for opportunities because people assume that I've been a single parent and I'm not going to be able to make it, even when I wasn't a parent, let alone a single parent. So those stereotypes happen and they stop people from being able to progress in their career. So again, when someone says something, think about, would you say that to a man? I think that really changes. I think it changes the perspective. So now we're going to play this quick rapid fire game. You'll have to use your chat again. And I'm going to show you a slide. There's going to be either a word or a saying on the slide. And I want you to choose 1, 2, 3, or 4. I don't want you to think like, oh my goodness, I wish I could see this or that. I want you to just make a rapid decision based on what you believe. There's no right, there's no wrong. And all of these people are who you think they are. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Slide 13. There we go. One more. Awesome, Jeremy. Thank you. Single parent. Who's the single parent here? Two, three, 3, 4. Okay. We got 1, 1. No ones. Okay. Single parent. Thank you. Next slide. CEO. Don't cheat just because I'm a CEO. You can't say number 4. Who do you think is a CEO on the slide? Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Next slide. Who grew up in the ghetto? Thank you. I love when I'm getting different numbers. That's awesome. Okay. Next slide. Doctor. Who has their PhD in this picture? Okay. Next slide. Who's the bad driver? I don't know any of these people. Right. Me either, Brandon. Don't worry about it. Okay. And these are based on what you think, rapid responses. Next slide. Salesman. Who are you going to hire for your sales manager position? Awesome. Cool. Next slide. Who are you going to hire for your IT manager position? Good. All over. Awesome. I already hired the guy. Somebody's hiring number 1 and 4. You got a big budget there. All righty. Next slide. Who are you going to hire for your receptionist? Interesting. Next. Who's always late to work? Number 5. Okay. 3s, 4s, 2s, everybody. Awesome. I don't think there was 1. Me, the bad driver. All right, next slide. Okay, choose the person to replace you. That's always a great place to be if you can choose the person to replace you. Okay. Wonderful. I'm going to make a biased statement about the room, and I'm okay with that because I'm doing it with love. I feel like there's a lot of women answering these questions. And next slide. Who fits into your culture at the office right now? Your current culture, who fits in? Wonderful. All of them. I love seeing all of them. I love that because that's true. They all do. They all fit into your culture. I love getting that in a job interview. Do you think you're fit into the culture? Well, I don't know. Shouldn't the culture fit around me? Next slide. I think this might be the last. You walk into a meeting. Who do you speak to first? Myself, the person that addresses me. Nobody. Andy. Yes. First person I see. Perfect. All right. And that is the last slide. That is the last slide. So we'll go to this next slide. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, no one won, Phil. I have no prizes for you. But what I will tell you, the person who wins is the person who is the most honest, right? You are the winner. And that's the reason you're the winner is because that's how you feel. Those are your biases. I didn't say, who do you think and do you think it's right? I said, who do you think? What are you basing that off of? I would hope to think that no one in this room would make a decision this quick, especially when we're talking about a hiring decision or we're talking about fitting into culture. I would hope that no one in this room, I could guess no one in this room is making those type of decisions, that we all are being strategic and that we're looking at that person. You need to look at their qualification. You need to look at who they are. And again, I believe that you wrap your culture around people that they don't actually have to fit in. You bring them in and wrap your culture around people to make them feel included. And so, again, I just want to go over it. These are automatic and instant associations and stereotypes of attitudes towards people. It doesn't make you prejudiced. It doesn't make you racist. It doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. And when you are human, that's your instinct. This is how you kind of walk your way through the world. But as leaders in our community, leaders in education, folks that have the opportunity to teach our youth and even our adults, you have to be sure that once you understand what your biases are, how you obtain those biases, you can recognize them instantly, and now you can begin to make a change. And so this is a pretty large group, and we cannot have this discussion in its totality with everyone in the room. So Jeremy has put together some breakout rooms. I don't think there's any rhyme or reason why you have been assigned to a room. And what I'd like you to do is answer the question on the slide. And the question on the slide is, tell me, Jeremy, did I go before you? Did I mess you up? Um, did you start dropping people in the rooms?
Not yet. I had to stop sharing my screen to create the breakout rooms. Am I on the right
Okay.
slide right now?
Awesome. I can't see, but we should be on the sign that says breakout sessions.
Yes, you're
Yes. Perfect. So when you go into your groups, you have two options here. You can talk about a bias that you've had or that you have and how it affects your relationships with your colleagues, or you can talk about a bias you have and how it influences your work culture. And so they seem like the same question, but they're really not, right? Because your culture and your colleagues, yes, we are all together, but what are you doing and how is it affecting the people that's working next to you? And then also, how is it affecting the group as a whole? So we'll go into our breakout sessions. We'll go in there for about, it's 1:42. That's not right. It's 1:42. We'll go in for about 5 minutes. And just if anyone wants to share, it'll give you a chance to talk to your group. We'll go into those breakout minutes for 5 minutes. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks for getting that record button again, Aaron.
Hello. And welcome back. Thank you so much for doing that. Hopefully you guys had some folks in your group that was willing to share. For the interest of time, I can't get a lot of feedback, but I would like somebody to share either how their bias is affecting their culture or a colleague of theirs. I believe you have the option to go off of mute, but I'd love to hear how you've recognized your bias and how it is affecting others. So not everybody at once.
I can go. One of the things that we talked about was how kind of the opposite of looking at all those pictures of people is that not having pictures be a part of who you're going to hire, going through and seeing their qualifications regardless of what they look like and how old they are or whatever, that you could make judgments on if you saw pictures. Whereas if you're looking at their resume, you're going to get a better idea of, what they've done, what they're capable of.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet that was a great question. Is it Pola or Pola? Pola?
It's Pola from
Pola.
Cedro Woolley.
Oh, hi, Miss Pola. So hi. So yeah, so I think that was a great conversation, only because there are studies, I'm not going to go over them, but there are studies on blind interviews and how you get a better and a more diverse group of people if you do blind interviews. I myself do blind interviews. There's also a study that I thought was really interesting on inventions and you know how you submit your invention for approval and folks would send in their invention. So what they did was send in the same invention, one male name, one female name. The female name, folks were saying, no, don't do that. Don't, try something else, do something different. The invention with the male name actually got more praise and everything. So it's really important to understand that names, faces, all of those things matter. So when we're talking about hiring people, thinking of a way that you can hire, whether that's working with blind interviews or if that that is working. I look up my people on LinkedIn, and I probably shouldn't do that because it allows me to color what I think they are and who they are based on what they said, because otherwise, why am I looking at their resume if I don't trust that they put the right thing on the resume, right? So, you can look at that. You can do it board, and it's not just you. You allow other people to come into the room. It's always best to get someone who's been in that position or has had that role, to help you with that as well. So great. So I thank you for that, Ms. Pola. I would love to hear what everyone else did in their room, but we just are all out of time. This is such a hard conversation to have in 1 hour. And I do want to know, out of respect for your time, this is supposed to end at 2 o'clock. We did start, a couple of minutes late, but if you'd like to stay, I'd love for you to stay. I have 3 kind of to-dos for you that you instantly can do. If not, then you can, drop off. And I know that they're going to make this readily available either on social media, email, or, and then I'll be sending also a resource page along with it. So if we can go ahead and go to the next slide, the slide that says be a sponsor. Yes, please. Yes, Miss Julie and James, we will definitely get that out. So I talked earlier about, there's 3 things that you can instantly do. And I talked about a sponsor in my introduction. And if we have chamber people in the world, unfortunately, this is not the kind of sponsor that we're looking for, like a financial sponsor. This is something completely different. This is a sponsor of a person. And again, the reason that I'm here today is because Monique is a sponsor of Zenobia. And the reason Monique is a sponsor of Zenobia is because Kristen was a sponsor of Zenobia and gave me the opportunity to speak at WCCE. The way that that came about, I think, is very important. You can't be a sponsor for someone unless you know who that person is underneath everything else. And so let me tell you how this happened. I was very new to the chamber world. I've been in the chamber world for 2 years. I go to a event where there's all chamber executives. And again, even at this event where they're all executives, I was mistaken for the server. And hey, is there any way you can throw this in the trash? That type of deal, right? And so I was really nervous during this conference because I had no idea they're using acronyms and have all this experience and they're getting awards. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. I'm new to the crowd, right? And so what happened is Kristen pulled me aside and we just had a deep down conversation about who is Zenobia? What does Zenobia do? And what she did was she separated why I was there and got to know me just as a person. And from that conversation, she had an opportunity to have someone come in and speak about DEI. And she said, I was someone that she thought of, not because I'm a chamber exec, because one has nothing to do with the other. It was because she took time to talk to me, learn who I was, and then she's a sponsor. And what that means, if someone's talking in a room or at a decision-making table, and your privilege allows you to recommend, or your privilege allows you to put someone on the agenda, it is your job, if you really value diversity, equity, and inclusion, is to bring up someone who typically wouldn't have the opportunity. And that's really how to use your privilege for good. That's how to use your bias for good, is by invading the spaces where you belong and that you've earned. Let's make no mistake, you've earned those spots, you belong in those spots, that it's now your job to be that person to pull other people in. And you can't be a sponsor of someone if you don't know who they are at their core. So I would advise you to take time to listen to your employees, to make sure that you understand what your employees' goals are. I ask all of my employees in their first 7 days of work, what are your long-term career goals? Because I don't want to hold them back. And I also don't want to miss out on a great marketer or a great writer because I didn't ask them and I've kind of put them in this box of answering the phone. So be a sponsor for somebody and be a sponsor for somebody today. Next slide, Jeremy. So this is really, so, if we were in the business of checking boxes, you all would be able to check your box right now. You are increasing your awareness on implicit bias. And so you now, hopefully, from the way that I've told this story about implicit bias, can have a real conversation about what biases are. And now you can recognize them a mile away. So you've done the training. Okay, that's the first thing to increase your Training is free. Training is everywhere. There are so many YouTube videos. There are trainings like this. Your higher education institutions are probably doing things like this. Do your work and get training. This is not something I will tell you, folks do not like to be, and especially me, I don't want to be the spokesperson for my community. So the last thing I want you to do is try to get your training from someone who belongs in this minority group. And of course, I keep saying minority group and woman and Black woman because that's my perspective. But we all know, obviously, there are many diverse groups and underserved groups. So for me, the last thing I want you to do is go out and say, hey, Zenobia, I've been taking this training. Tell me a little bit, what's the Black experience like? Yeah, don't do that. Okay. You have to do your due diligence and make sure that you're using the resources available to you. Execution is everything. You can go to trainings all day long and you can check boxes all day long, but if you actually don't change anything, what it's saying is that you're okay with perpetuating the culture that you have now. You are okay with the inequities in economic development. That's what it's saying when you don't actually put your words, your action into execution. So there's something that you can do today. I am almost certain that when you leave here today, you're going to go into a space where there's an opportunity to make a change. And I want you to be able to do that. Think of the person like, you know what? This person always gets this opportunity. What about Susan? What about Audra, right? You have to be willing to go out on a limb and execute. And until you do that, you're really not a sponsor for anyone. The next thing is open dialogue. It is okay to be in a learning space. I think when we first started, I asked what is implicit bias, and they had the best answer that I've seen all day. And it was like, Zenobia, I don't know. I'm here to learn. That's open dialogue. It is okay for you to say, I don't know, can you tell me? Or I'm sorry that made you feel this way, help me understand why. That's open dialogue. No one's going to say, don't ask me questions, I don't want to tell you. It doesn't work that way. So just be open to dialogue with people that don't look like you and don't sound like you. So the next thing is trusted messengers. You have to know the power of a trusted messenger. When you're trying to reach a community, the worst thing you can do is gather people who are not in the community. I believe in boots on the ground, first hand experience. And those are trusted messengers. Those are people that you lean on to get your data from, to bounce ideas off of, because they're actually living and feeling and seeing. So be mindful and intentional about speaking with trusted messengers. And then action speaks louder than words. That goes to execution, but a little bit more. If you're in a space and you hear someone being biased against someone, I challenge you to say, you know what, James? Sorry, James. You know what, Jay? I can just see you right there. Sorry. You know what, James? I don't think that was nice what you said to Monica. I think you should apologize. I think that was offensive. How do you know Monica doesn't fill in the blank, right? That makes me an advocate for Monica. It makes me a trusted messenger. I see how that makes her feel. And then I've put action behind my words. What does that do? Monica trusts me. Monica feels into the fold, and now we can work together because Monica knows that James knows that wasn't right and it's not going to happen again. So now she's not always on, I don't want to call it standby, but she's not anxious about any interactions because she knows James knows he crossed the line, if that makes sense, right? So you have to be willing to say something and put action to those words. Next slide. So create an inclusive environment. This is probably one of the hardest things that you are going to do, because it requires you to step outside of yourself and to step out of this. And I'm going to talk to just my women leaders for just a quick second. That crabs in a barrel mentality, that there's not enough room for all of us, that there's only one seat at the table for me. Oh, they only have one woman in economic development. I'm not going to give up my seat and promote Zenobia. We cannot do that. Okay. You have to be willing to give up your seat for the good of someone else, and or share that seat, right? Or build another seat or put a table under the table. I don't care how you do it, but please drop you're more than welcome, Heather. Please drop the crabs in a barrel mentality. That is what I believe is holding back our women leaders today. And if you ever hear yourself saying, there's just something about Zenobia, I don't know what it is. Let me tell you, it's bias. It's not real. It's what you think I am. It's what you think I'm going to be. So that feeling that you have, now there's a difference between, oh, she's kind of sketchy, right? I'm not talking that. I'm just talking, there's something about her I don't know. She's kind of abrasive. She talks a lot. Please don't hold people back because of that. You're not sure what environment that person came from. So create this environment where everyone can make their way to the top. Create an environment where, have you ever been sitting at in a boardroom, and you look around and you're like, wow, this team is really diverse. This is great. But then what I want you to do is say, well, who in here actually has the influence? Does everyone have a fair shot? Everyone gets to speak. But you know what? I notice every time that Barbara speaks, Cynthia goes, oh, let me piggyback on that. And then we're like, oh, Cynthia, that's so great. Well, that's not inclusive. Who's going to tell Cynthia that Barbara already said that was a great idea? Right? It's those small things that make people feel included. If someone is constantly putting up ideas and their ideas are not put into action, you have a diverse group, but you don't have an inclusive group. And so all they are separate but equal. They need to be treated separately in order for everyone to be equal. So this inclusive environment really just means making sure that people feel like they are a part of something. Being diverse, being equitable or equity is not inclusive. You have to have one to have the other. And so then I'll go to my last slide. And this is just going to be my conclusion. So number one is we all have biases. Put your hand up, everybody. We're going to do our DEI/AA meeting. DEI. My name is Zenobia and I am biased. That's all you have to say, right? And when you walk into the room and you know that, then that's just fine. Yes, somebody raised their hand. Oh, great job, Kim. You do a lot of Zooms because you guys are using, I'm like, oh, someone raised their hand. So great. All right. So biases can also be unintentional and they're rapid responses. So don't feel bad. They're rapid. You say something like, oops, I shouldn't have said that. That's a rapid response. We're going to give you grace on that. Be a sponsor. Please. Oh, thank you. I'm not going to miss my plane. I just landed where I needed to be, but thank you. Be a sponsor, right? Be a sponsor of somebody today. You can do it today. Be inclusive. Know the difference of inclusivity and equity or diversity. There's a huge difference. Be aware. Raise your awareness. Every time you have an opportunity to learn, you should be learning. And it's going to be from, maybe not who you think you're going to learn from, but everyone can teach somebody else something. This with DEI, and you'll learn this through this J.E.D.I series if you're going to take it all. This is not a one size fits all. This is not going to be an easy fix for your organization. But if you start with yourself, it'll be at least easier for you to get through the change curve. Authenticity. If this is not authentic and you really don't understand why you want to increase DEI efforts in your office, please don't do it, because what's going to happen is it's going to have the negative effect that you're looking for. So, just leave it the way it is instead of trying to be, we're just going to do this because everyone's talking about it. Well, no one has time for that. We're too busy, right? And folks on the opposite end of that, folks who value and need that inclusion, if it's not authentic, you're actually pushing them further away. So just be very careful and be authentic with your messaging. Your messaging should come from trusted messengers. You'd be surprised the amount of people who are not certified diversity professionals, do not have masters, do not have degrees that can tell you a story about equity and what it looks like and what it feels like. So again, look for your trusted messengers. DEI they're separate. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. We like to put them all together. They're separate. You can be diverse and still not equitable. You can be diverse and not inclusive. And I think I went over that for you guys. So just remember, when you see those words kind of lumped together, it should always really have the dots. They're three separate words, three separate actions, and it's actually inclusion. Think of that as more of a feeling and less of an action. A person has to feel included. And the last, but not least, and someone said this earlier in the presentation, that DEI starts at the top. So if you're at the top and you're not on board, there's no need on looking for trusted messengers. There's no need for you to, do presentations. You yourself have to get into a place where you understand what DEI can do for your organization, how it can transform and increase your bottom line. And then you can begin to go on this authentic journey to teach folks and to include people into your culture. So with that being said, that is the end of my presentation. I thank you very much. Normally we have time for questions. I don't know, I'll let Jeremy and Monique decide that, but if someone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
If everybody has time and they have a question, I don't want to shut it off if they've got questions.
Right. Awesome.
Tons of thank yous in the comments.
Yes, I see. Sarah says, I have one. Can you unmute, Sarah? Oh,
Yeah, I think that'd be easier. So I'm someone who learns from examples. So we talked about examples of how having this mindset can hurt others, but I'd be interested in if you had any examples of how having this mindset can actually hurt ourselves.
yeah. Well, I think the first thing is you yourself. I learn from other people, right? And I get experiences. If you're in a place where everyone else is moving towards this diverse and they understand it, but you're kind of held back, you are going to get left behind. So that really can hurt you. Also, I believe in treating everyone with, the same respect. You don't know where someone's going to be on a different date, right? The janitor might be hiring you next month or next week, right? And so I feel like if you're not understanding your own biases, the way you're hurting yourself is you're really limiting your contact with people. You're limiting your ability to learn from other people or connect to other people. So, is it going to stop you from getting opportunities? Potentially, right? It probably can. So it's really just about DEI starts with you first before you can tell anybody else. And it really gives you the opportunity to, like I said, the connection with people and the understanding. Because there was something in the comments that someone said that their grandfather made a comment about the Holocaust and she wasn't able to say anything. That's a detrimental to you as a person, because guess what? You have to carry that on. And now you may be in a position where you want to speak up for yourself, but you can't. And you don't know how. That's how potentially it can hold you back, Sarah.
Sure. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other hands up? I can't tell now. How many on the screen?
I don't see any other.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. Well, I sure appreciate you guys, and I will just apologize again. I am not this spacey normally. I am in a nice place, but I appreciate you guys putting up with all the airport noise with
We
me.
totally understand. I mean, things happen, and I'm just so sorry for your loss. So thank you for being here. Thank you again to our sponsors, J.E.D.I, all those area chambers. I'm gonna bring up my list so I don't forget anybody. Big Rock Roadhouse, Cascade Golf Corps, Plumeria Breezes Travel, Skagit Valley College, and all the area chambers. And like I said, J.E.D.I, we couldn't have done this without everybody. So, and of course, for Jeremy for being the rock, putting it all together in the background. I really appreciate that. So thank you, Zenobia. Thanks for being here. And I know this couldn't have been easy for you to separate your brain and your heart from what you had to do today. So we really appreciate you.
I appreciate that. My nephew would be very proud of me that I was able to do it without crying.
I'm sure he would.
So,
All right.
yes.
Well, thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Stay tuned for the next in the series. We've got next month is Jeremy. It's Chinook, correct? Yes. So we've got Chinook speaking next month with some disabilities and learning abilities and other physical abilities. So anyway, thank you, everybody.